Looking for a fun, different new shirt? Something related to the things you like? Climbing in the outdoors, perhaps philosophy? Visit our new store, theDIHEDRAL Goods, on Etsy, and you'll find all that and much more.
I'm on! Roll!
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the theDIHEDRAL podcast. This is Gaia, and today we are joined by our one and only Carrot. As some of our listeners might know, Carrot is a philosopher, and the past year, 2024, he embarked on a research journey to explore the topic of education and the future of humanity. Carrot, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the side of the microphone. It's going to be interesting.
You're going to do great. So just to give our listeners some context, what exactly does the future of humanity entail in your research? What's the scope?
Yes. So, you can look at the future of humanity in the short term and the long term, but it's really interesting time to be alive because there's so much happening in technology. And it's not just one thing, it's all of these different areas of technology that are happening all at once. And so it's sometimes referred to as a coming wave where it's not just something like artificial intelligence or something like splicing DNA or even something like unique new materials like graphene. All of this stuff, quantum computing is another big example, is happening at the same time. So humanity's future is a bigger question mark than we ever could have guessed. And it's up to futurists to try to speculate what could be coming next for all of us here who share this tiny blue marble Earth.
So essentially the future of humanity in terms of technological advancement and development.
Not necessarily. And so, my focus was mostly on technology, but the future of humanity also looks at things that are more natural, like what are the chances of an asteroid hitting the planet or a supervolcano or the impacts of global warming and things like that. So anything that could have an effect on the way that humans exist or cease to exist in the future is kind of things that fall within this discipline.
So you say that you focused on the technological aspect. Why were you drawn to that component instead of the natural one, for example?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I teach philosophy. And so I was really curious about how technology is going to impact education. And so for anybody in academia, over the last couple of years, since I think November of 2022, ChatGPT came on the scene. And there are a lot of changes, from simple changes like, oh, students have a whole new way of cheating, and forced us to question what plagiarism was and all these different rules. And so over the last 2 years, the major emphasis and focus are what are we going to do about ChatGPT? And that's just in education. In other areas, ChatGPT is making a pretty big impact, and not just ChatGPT. Any kind of service like that. So Google's Gemini, for example, or what is it, Grok is Twitter's. All these are making impacts in different areas. So in the area of acting, for example, we have dialogues being written or voice actors, and these are all going to be playing a big role. But the problem is, right now, at least in my area of academia, there's like this almost obsessive approach to what are we going to do about ChatGPT? How are we going to overcome these problems? And I think that's very, very limited, because what ChatGPT is just a very tip of the iceberg when it comes to new technologies like artificial intelligence. And if we get hung up on something like a generative model like ChatGPT or Gemini or something like this, we are really going to miss what's coming on the other side of that storm.
What methodology did you implement for this research project? Was it mainly secondary research, primary research? What was the process like?
Mostly secondary research. So by training, I'm a philosopher, and I really needed to acclimate myself to the way in which futurists did their work. And so I just delved into some of the most popular futurists, and then I would see who they were inspired by, and then I would read their papers and their books. And it's just been a year of digging into what people who have lifelong expertise in this area have to say so that I can take it and apply it to the things that I'm doing.
You just mentioned ChatGPT, the involvement of artificial intelligence in the way that we interact with technology today, and we will continue to in the future. So we know that the development of this tool popped up frequently during your research. What are the predictions for the future as this technology continues to evolve?
Yeah, it goes from solving every possible problem that humanity faces to complete annihilation and anywhere in between. And so what we can be pretty certain of is things aren't going to be like they were yesterday. I would say in the next 15 years, the world as we know it will probably just be unrecognizable. And so one of the things that I focused on with regard to education specifically is what happens to education when jobs are no longer the driving force behind people trying to get a degree or a diploma or some way to make money. And so once jobs go away, what purpose will education serve? So that's been kind of the underlying research that I've been trying to do in all of these things. And I mean, that's well short of human extinction or something like that, but I still think it's important because if education doesn't serve the purpose of getting people jobs, what does that mean for education? Now, I think it's going to be a big issue once jobs start to diminish based on the abilities of robotics and artificial intelligence. Um, People without jobs will probably start to lose purpose. And I know there's a lot of people who are just like, oh, gross, I hate my job, or I really dislike it, or something like this. That's well and true, but it does offer us a lot of benefits, like getting us an income which allows us to eat and pay rent and pay for excursions and things like that. Not only that, but it takes a lot of our day being at work, and then we get home complaining about work or talking about how much we love work. It serves a role, and it really gives people a purpose. So you get rid of that, and I kind of worry about what happens next to people who lose their ability to make contributions to their family or make contributions to society.
So, based on what you've read, what would be the propositions to counter that effect?
Yeah, that's podcasts like this particular discussion right now are really important. People just aren't talking about it. Toby Ord, who's out in Oxford, wrote a book called Precipice, and he says that within the next 100 years, there's a 1 in 6 chance that there won't be any future for humans. Like 1 in 6 is a really scary number.
What does he mean by a future for humans?
That we have, that's the level of risk involved in humans becoming extinct within the next 100 years. There's major problems that go well beyond the worst problems that we're facing in terms of global warming with artificial general intelligence and our inability to understand it, our inability to contain it, and our inability to allow our goals to align with the goals of an intelligence that would be greater than ours. And so, going back to your question, we're not talking about those things, and we need to be talking about those not just in engineering schools or at corporations like Google or Meta. We all should be involved in this conversation and understand just how serious this issue is, both the benefits and the potential harms.
Okay, several questions. They'll trickle down.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
it can't be all grim.
Definitely not.
You share at least a positive outlook in regards to the development of artificial intelligence and this technological advancement. What would be the best case scenario based on everything that you've read?
So this is one of the issues. So the best case scenario for me is going to be very different from the best case scenario for you, which could be very different for the best case scenario for lots of other people. So perhaps, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that my best case scenario would be another person's worst case scenario. And so let me just talk about some things that we might generally agree on as being good or better. And so with artificial intelligence, our ability to run data at speeds that are impossible for a human to have access to could be very, very helpful in terms of understanding weather patterns or understanding how to eliminate certain levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. You see huge, huge amounts of growth in terms of health benefits. I mean, our ability to understand COVID, for example, we would be way behind if it weren't for something like artificial intelligence helping us. And so in terms of health, having very specialized medicine where we could have, an artificial intelligence guide each and every individual and know exactly what was going on for things like cancer detection. I mean, those are things that are here now, and that's only going to get better. So in terms of health scale, that could be a huge impact that could make things better. Global warming could be, and I want to emphasize could be because we just don't know. It's still futurism, and these are based on probabilities. But with the help of artificial intelligence, we could solve some of the biggest threats, even in terms of asteroids that might be, in line with impacting the Earth one day. We would be able to have access to that potentially hundreds of years in advance, in which we would give ourselves the opportunity to overcome it. Longevity in life, curing aging and most diseases, all those things have the potential to be eliminated, which is one of the reasons why we're pushing this advancement into technology so quickly, because there are benefits, but to do that at the cost of ignoring the risks is a grave, grave mistake. That again, that's the point. That's the things that we all need to be talking about.
So you mentioned some overlapping of different factors.
Mhm.
At the beginning, you said that the future of humanity does not only involve technological advancements, in this particular circumstance, artificial intelligence, we could have natural disasters, etc. In this book that you mentioned, Precipice, and I know because we've talked about it before outside of the interview, you mentioned that this author presents different probabilities based on different case scenarios. Which one is the one that he sees being the most likely exterminator of human
Yeah,
of humans?
yeah.
And
So
how do these overlap?
great question. So I want to say that not all futurists see the world in the same way. Like Ray Kurzweil is an optimist on the level that I don't think anybody matches, and he thinks we should be able to cure death and solve all these major obstacles for humanity, perhaps by 2035, within 10 years. And so that's a high level of optimism. I don't share that level of optimism, but I'm glad that some people are doing that. And so going back to the point on the other side of that, I would say most futurists who deal with artificial intelligence, the biggest problem is what we refer to as the alignment problem, and from there the control problem. And so the alignment problem is something that I alluded to just a second ago. We all have different ideas about what the best case scenario for humanity would be. Again, even you and I might have very, very different ideas about what the best case would be. And so we have these nuances in our language that allow us to communicate effectively, but far from perfectly. And so let's say we have a goal that we want everybody to be happy. And we just program, all right, you're this artificial general intelligence, meaning you can do everything that humans can do, but much better. So what can you do to go make people as happy as they possibly can be? Well, let's say that particular intelligence understands happiness as dopamine rushes, and so they develop some kind of medicine that every person gets injected with a certain level of dopamine, or a cocktail that includes dopamine, and puts them in maybe some weird comatose state where they're always feeling very, 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 very good. And now we're just like that for eternity, while artificial intelligences are out there doing whatever it is that they would do if we weren't there to control them. And so that's one example, is that our alignment in terms of what makes us happy is very different. So for example, I love to read. And I really have this great feeling when I'm found to be wrong. Like when I learn something that I didn't know and it changes my worldview. Those are high points in my life. And there's other people who hate being wrong, right? It's just the worst thing in the world. And so, we can't align ideas between ourselves to be able to code how humanity should progress is very difficult to do. And so let me give you two examples. One is it kind of has to be mentioned in every talk that has to do with the future of humanity. It's Nick Bostrom's paperclip example, where let's say we do something very mundane, where there's just this paperclip manufacturing company who wants to make money selling paperclips. And so it writes a code, make paperclips. And that's it. And it doesn't say more like, protect humanity or stop at certain points, like just make some paper clips. And so now this AI is like, okay, I'm going to make paper clips, and I start turning everything around me into paper clips. I turn the planet into paper clips, and all the people I have around me I can use as just atoms where I can somehow rearrange them and make more paper clips. And eventually I make my way to the moon. And now we have more paper clips. And with nothing in this thing's way, the entire universe becomes nothing but paper clips just because we forgot to write further code that says stop at this point. I mean, there's so many possible mistakes. And so a lot of people are like, yeah, but that's preposterous. I personally don't think it is preposterous because we're not all knowing and we don't have the ability to communicate effectively with one another about how things align. It's very difficult to do that with machines as well. But just to give an example of the alignment problem that's already happened is you don't have to look any further than just social media. And just I think to call out two companies, Google and what is now Meta, or specifically YouTube and Facebook, they have this idea where we are going to look for perpetual growth. And so they write an algorithm, perpetual growth, get more eyes on our content as much as possible. And so they set the standards of how many minutes they want eyes on and so on and so forth. And then this algorithm goes out and gets that. And so in 2017 in Myanmar, you have a genocide that started because the algorithm found that you're going to get more eyes on certain things with misinformation, specifically things like hate. And the same thing happens in Sri Lanka. We saw it in the United States with things like QAnon and all these different types of things, where these algorithms learn I get more minutes when people watch these things. And so in a sense, it ends up weaponizing people, and hate speech moves to the top. And it becomes this cycle where hate speech gets more eyes and more eyes are on hate speech. And then we start to get into actions where literally people start to die or would be okay getting killed for misinformation that was not set up by anything other than an algorithm that was trained to get more eyes. That's an example of the alignment problem that's been happening. And as artificial intelligence gets better at what it does, if we're not there to put in curbs to slow down some of these problems, it could be a paperclip universe. And now maybe that's just a metaphor, but it's a metaphor for the idea that things can get really, really bad, really quickly as well.
You stated several things, but going back to the paperclip scenario and then the circumstances within Meta, etc. Do you have any particular books where people could learn or reference or use as sources for the circumstances which are important for people to be exposed to?
Yeah, there's two books that come to mind immediately. One is called The Chaos Machine, which I refer to quite a bit. They do a really good job of just talking about just the negative effects of social media on a grand scale, a lot of it having to do with the alignment problem. And then another one called Burn Book, which is also really good and gives a lot more specific examples and kind of highlights the problems with like endless scrolling on social media and how damaging that is, not only socially, but also personally. But those are books that I strongly recommend for anybody, unless you unless you just want to pretend like everything's okay. Then I'd probably stay away from those books because they put a light on things that a lot of people just don't consider.
Okay, so let's say we get to the point where we lose our job.
Mm-hmm.
or obsolete to what extent, what happens next?
Yeah, there's different approaches, and it's really great because there's a lot of great thinkers spending a lot of time on this. But it does take some work to get to some of these theories. And so, look, one thing is that production won't stop. Prices of goods are going to go down. Eventually, when we have robotics being able to displace every worker, you wouldn't need to worry about importing goods anymore because those could all be made wherever you are and wherever you're listening to this by robotics and artificial intelligence and things like that. So the price of goods would be driven way down in those instances. And you could imagine the same thing with farming, right? So when we have farming in our backyard, you wouldn't have to worry about shipping in different fruits from all over the place. But people are still going to need money. Where does that money come from? These corporations stand to gain trillions and trillions of dollars, but if there's not people to spend money, where's the money going to come from? I mean, dollars doesn't have to be actual dollars. That can be based in the form of raw materials, and data, I think, is going to be one of the most important materials moving forward. But getting back to your question, there are different ideas about how people could thrive, and one of those things is called a universal basic income, which basically amounts to the idea that everybody would get paid a certain amount of money in order to give them a certain standard of living. And I think that's fine, and I think that would be beneficial. But I still think that people would be wanting for purpose, and that's the thing that I'm really concerned with. Let's say a universal basic income comes into play in the next, I don't know, I don't want to take a guess at how many years, but let's say that comes into play and everybody has some money. Great, what are you going to do with your time? And so it doesn't take a futurist to sort of predict what people are going to do with their time. What do people do with their downtime now? And so a lot of people get trapped into doom scrolling with social media. I mean, they pay lots of money to understand the psychology of a person in order to have them want more and more and more and more and more and more. And for me personally, I don't think there's a lot of value in that type of life. Other people play hours and hours and hours of video games. And so I do see something like virtual reality playing a big role in ways that give people purpose. I mean, we've all, maybe not all of us, but most of us have gotten into TV shows where we're just like, okay, one more episode, one more episode, one more episode, and watching Netflix all day long. And in those days, maybe films and shows will be produced and starring artificial intelligence as well, and they would be riveting because those artificial intelligences would know exactly what type of media that we want to digest, and it could be curtailed directly to us. But again, I don't think that's a great way to spend our lives, especially if we have much longer longevity. I'd like to see humans be more productive. And that's where I get back to education. I think education provides more value than just, I need this to get a degree and I need this to get money. And so instead of a universal basic income, which might be like the bottom threshold of where we get some kind of income, we might have like a social service based income where you could get more if you, I don't know, work in forests or try to learn a new trade or do something that benefits not only you, but the people around you as well. Something as simple as reading to the elderly or playing games with people who don't have the ability to communicate with family. Like those are big, big deals. And if there's a need to pay somebody for something, those are things that we could be incentivized to go do to be a better person, to make society better. And so those are the things I look at. And I personally throw education into that as well. I think people are better served when they're educated. And so maybe paying people money to learn different trades, different skills, and just different things, how to write, how to read philosophy and stuff like that. So what's the name of the director with like the pencil mustache? He did like, oh crap, names are not my strong point, but he's great. He made Hairspray.
Oh, 1 second. John Waters?
Yeah, John Waters. John Waters is John Waters, if you happen to be listening, I've reached out to him to have him on the show several times because I'm so impressed by him and his attitude. He's great. I love him. But he's got this quote. So if you're offended by language, you might want to turn the volume down for a second. But it says something like this: if you go home with somebody and they don't have books, then don't fuck them. And I think that's important because I think what we could do is allow people to be attracted to intelligence, allow people to be attracted to other things other than, I don't know, I have a really nice car or a really nice job or something like that. Um, but in the same sense, forget books. If you take somebody home and they don't have an education, then there's other people who do. And so I think there's ways to incentivize learning that have to do with income, but also has to do with maybe social benefits like procreation, if that's something that still exists in the future. John Waters, thank you. He's great.
We went from education to procreation about accessibility.
Yeah, exactly.
So after all the months of research and all the books you read, which actually, how many books did you think you read?
Um, I I don't know. There's so the sabbatical of mine ends in 3 days, and I'm currently reading three books at this time. I'm trying to get them done within the next three days. But I haven't been reading at that pace for the whole time. But I don't know, 50. Let's just say 50.
That's a lot. So after reading all those books in that period of time, if you would have to guess, and again, this is just Carrot's take on it, and only his, based on how he interpreted the information, how do you think the future will look like? But describe it for us.
That's tough. It's very difficult to answer. I don't feel confident making predictions.
How do you?
At all.
Okay, let's play experience machine.
Okay.
How would be your ideal case scenario if you got to pick based on all the different factors that you have mentioned and that you have learned about?
Yeah, I can answer that one in a pretty simple manner. I want humans to have a chance to achieve their full potential, and that means we just have to survive. And so that's it. Like, I think technology is going to be very helpful, and it's going to help us achieve our full potential. But we're not close. We have so much to learn, so many places to grow, that if we ended it early because we were too focused on money or too focused on immediate gratification, it would be the greatest tragedy that I could possibly imagine. As far as we know, it's us on this planet. I called it a small blue dot or marble at the beginning of the show, but that's not what it is. It's the most magnificent, beautiful thing that any of us have ever come in contact with. And it's not going to be here forever. But reaching human potential means that we could potentially find another place to grow even more and get even better. And so if we put our potential at risk because of all of these really superficial goals, it would be a tragedy that every single person ought to be ashamed of for not doing more.
Okay, you heard it. So now let's just have a more lighthearted question to wrap up the show. And I would like, if possible, whenever we make this episode live, for you to share a list of books that you would recommend
Okay.
for people to, something digestible out of all the ones you read. I think would be good
I'd love
if
to
our
do that.
listeners are interested in exploring the topic too. So that would be great. Okay. Well, let's talk about the future of humanity and let's talk about very futuristic, cliche ways of seeing things.
Okay.
If at some point in time we get the chance to have some type of superpower developed by some type of technology, if you got the chance to create your own gadget, what superpower would it give you and what purpose would it serve?
Okay. Yeah. Actually, this is a really interesting question. One thing that, I mean, just taking it back to climbing, for example, technology is really going to help climbers do drastically different things. And so one thing is the ability to do long, hard approaches and make them much easier. Arc'teryx has a pair of pants that is essentially an exoskeleton. So in terms of having long, hard hikes, that becomes much easier because a lot of the weight is off you. And so I just saw this backpack that was released that it's almost like an exoskeleton with shocks in it. So your backpack will move up and down with you, essentially eliminating 80% of the weight. And so now you can have legs that can get you somewhere without having to waste, all this energy to get there. You have a backpack where you can imagine carrying all of your gear, where you're just kind of strolling for a leisurely walk, no matter how hard it's going to be. And then in terms of the future of climbing, I think there's going to be certain technologies that we can help. And so if you think of an exoskeleton for our legs, why not an exoskeleton for like a pair of gloves or something like that? So I'm never going to be able to climb a 515, but that doesn't mean without some aid I can't get up a 515. Now I don't think that we would ever say, oh, I sent a route, but it would be really, really fun to do that. And so not only that, but there's going to be other wearables that we'll have in the future that would probably allow us to not have to carry anything. If you think of a drone just setting down all of your gear, whether it's camping or hiking or climbing, and you just walking in with your exoskeleton pants, wearing your, Meta has, I showed them early, but their Ray-Ban augmented reality glasses are amazing, scary in certain aspects, but also cool. So you put these glasses on and it has a line through the forest. You don't have to worry about some app getting you lost in the woods, as you and I know happens literally every time we try to go climbing somewhere different. Yeah, exactly. So that's not exactly a superpower, but those are real things that would allow climbers and people in the outdoor community to do way, way more with way, way less. And so those are things that are out literally right now. And as they get scaled up, price is going to come down. So it's actually a really exciting time to be a climber or an outdoor adventurist as these things come into play.
And I think about too the medical implications. I think it's exciting to see how challenges in the medical industry that existed 20 years ago will be completely different to the ones that we have today in a matter of months in the future.
Oh yeah, not only in terms of curing things, but also preventing things from happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really spectacular.
Now I think about when you were talking about the exoskeleton and the drone being able to bring the things for you. I was thinking, are there any anime fans here? Dragon Ball Z, those capsules that Bulma carried with her, just like little pills, and she would just throw them and they would turn into like a motorcycle or a full-on house. Yeah. I grew up thinking that was impossible, but who knows? No, maybe we'll have them.
I'll say this: we probably will. So 3D printing of the future, when we can start printing things at the atomic level, means that we can create anything. I mean, everything is essentially composed of atoms. And when we can start arranging those atoms in any way we see fit, we know that carbon is made of atoms, and so we can make our own diamonds. You can potentially, given the right amount of resources, create a diamond motorcycle from a 3D printer. Again, if we're down to the level of printing at the atomic level, which theoretically is possible, and there's a lot of money being poured into it today. So that's really exciting.
Oh my, okay, exciting stuff. Depending on how you view it, both positive and scary.
Positive and scary.
But that's part of life, and that's what comes with change.
Yes.
So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Carrot, for sharing your knowledge with us. And we'll be sharing some book recommendations for you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on this side of the microphone. It was a lot of fun.
Of course, thank you.
Enjoy listening to adventure stories, then you should visit theDIHEDRAL.com. You will find stories from other members of the community and read about climbing, life, and the outdoors. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Let's connect and climb on.
Climb on!